Hello and welcome to Guai Gaming, where we're doing another ARK Science video, and today we're looking at veggie cakes. For those of you who don't know, sweet veggie cakes are a food in ARK that you can put in your dino's inventory. Herbivores, and only herbivores, so not omnivores like bears and things, will eat the cake automatically to heal themselves when they reach 85% health. Other tames will eat the cake as a food source, but they won't heal from it, so be careful who you give your cake to. The cake heals up to 10% of your tame's health, which is up to a maximum of 2100 HP. The healing is done over a 30-second duration, and there is a 30-second cooldown before they can eat another. They're also a pain in the ass to make because they require sap and honey, which requires bees. Fuck bees. With the basics out of the way, let's get on to testing. What I wanted to know was how much of a stat difference having cakes makes to a boss army. So for example, if a group of Theres needed a base stat of 50 points in health and 50 points in melee, what would the same group of Theres with the same XP, the same level ups and the same saddle need as their base stats if they were given cakes? Functionally, what I was looking at is how many mutations you can avoid if you use cakes. To find this out, I tested 3 herbivores, the Theri, the Chali, and the Stego, against 2 bosses, the Broodmother and the Megapithecus. We started with high base stats in our boss armies and reduced them until that army failed, giving us the base stat level at which each tame was no longer able to fight that particular boss successfully. Each tame was given the same level ups, so 50 levels spent, with 20 of those levels going into health and 30 going into melee, and each tame had a 100 armor saddle. For the Megapithecus, the lowest base stat that each army could beat the boss was at 70 health and 70 melee for the Chali, 65 health and 65 melee for the Stego, and 30 health and 30 melee for the Theri. For the Broodmother, it followed a similar pattern, with it being 150 health and 150 melee for the Chali, 110 health and 110 melee for the Stego, and 55 health and 55 melee for the Theri. Now that we've established a baseline point at which each of the 3 tames fails against the 2 bosses, we can continue from that point, this time adding 10 cakes to each tame. So, if without the cakes, the army comprised of 145 stat Chalis was the first to fail against the Broodmother, that is the army that we'll start with now that we've added the cakes. Using this method, every tame showed an improvement, with the base stats required for beating each boss dropping by varying degrees between tames. With cakes, the lowest base stat that each creature could beat the Megapithecus was 40 stats for the Chali, 35 stats for the Stego, and 25 stats for the Theri. For the Broodmother, it was a bit higher again. Broodmother's a bit tougher. It was 110 for the Chali, it was 70 for the Stego, and 45 for the Theri. It's kind of wild just how big a difference there is there, especially in the Chali, for fighting the Broodmother versus fighting the Megapithecus. So, if we compare the lowest stats at which each tame can beat the bosses, with and without cakes, we can see exactly how much of a difference the cake makes. Interestingly, for both the Broodmother and the Megapithecus, the cake makes the exact same difference for the Stego and the Chali, reducing the needed base stats by 40 points and 30 points respectively. However, for the Theri, the cake reduces the stats needed for both the Brood and the Megapithecus by 10 points and 5 points respectively. This suggests that the cake is far more valuable for weaker off-meta picks than it is for the Theri. In conclusion, looking at the stat changes for the different tames, it could be quite easily argued that your time would be better spent breeding and doing more mutating if you were using Theres as your main army than spending the time farming for veggie cakes. However, if you were trying to use Chalis, Ankis, Stegos, a less powerful, more off-meta pick, The veggie cakes are a very good investment that will severely reduce the amount of breeding, mutating and stat hunting you'll need to do to be able to get past the bosses. Thank you very much for watching. I know this has been a science heavy, numbers heavy video, and I'll try and get back to a more lighter, action based ARK Science video next time. But I hope you've learned something and I hope you've enjoyed the video. I hope to see you next time. Toodles!